Time is 10:02. We've called meeting to order. Is everything on and ready to go, Tony?
Yeah.
Perfect. Do roll call. Sean Eric?
Here.
Steve Reinhardt?
Here.
Barbara Evans?
Here.
Dave Motley? Here. Diana Rose is not here. Joel Williamson? Not here. Mike Morgan?
Here.
Robert John Dane? Okay. We have a quorum. Discussion and possible action to excuse any committee members' absence. Any discussion on that? Do we want to bring up Diana at this time?
I was going to do it in AMS, but we can do it now.
Okay, let's just go ahead and get it.
So for those of you who don't know, Diana Rose has resigned. She's moving to Georgia.
Oh, wow.
And she's resigned her position on the committee. So there is a vacancy for an inspector member.
What was left on her appointment?
2021. So 2 more years. So
Okay.
whoever is elected to replace her would serve the remainder of her term and then be eligible to be reappointed at the end of that. But yeah, so she regretfully resigned. She's moving to Georgia, and so again, there's an inspector vacancy. There's a process in place by which we go about doing that. We need to get a committee proposed, possibly. We're looking at some other options, but likely committee proposed to vet applications as they come in and get you guys someone up and running as possible.
So in theory, that person should be up and running by the January meeting.
I would think so. Would Chelsea, don't you think so?
I suspect so.
Yeah.
Okay. We can probably put it in the insider that if people are interested.
I think so, yeah.
Whatnot. Okay.
Exactly.
Item number 3, ratification of the minutes of the July 15, 2019 meeting. I believe those were set in a separate email, or they were.
No, they're well, the
Actually, written
printout,
parts,
the
yeah.
printout was included in the agenda, but the video has been up
Yes.
for a while.
To entertain a motion to approve and or ratify the minutes from July 15, 2019.
Motion.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second made. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Minutes are ratified. Number 4, general comments from visitors on non-agenda items. If there are any comments from visitors on non-agenda items, please stand now, identify yourself, and you have the floor. Hearing none. Welcome, Mr. Doyle.
Do we want to talk about these at all? Did everyone see these comments from the former member, Curtis Carr? About the, they're included in your material stuff, the
Did you
SOP.
see that included in the material? That was specifically related to SOP committee, right?
Yeah, he just had some comments about the general direction, what he thought was.
So Steve, is there an impression out there that we're kind of going back to adding things that we took out on the last round of SOPs?
I think if you listen to some of the minutes from the previous meetings, I think it could be easily perceived that we're trying to get way more specific, or at least there was a question about getting specific, because we actually had.
On a couple of things, but not,
Yeah.
I mean, I got the feeling from there that he thought we were going back to a lot of the details.
Well, if you remember the previous meeting, we actually had a discussion and a conversation about a general direction for the SOP committee on whether we wanted to say general or be more specific. So that could be very likely.
I think that's what his comments based on.
Yeah, okay.
No action, just wanted to make sure everyone's
Yeah.
aware of that. And also wanted to put on the record that Ms. Williamson is here, present.
Welcome to up.
Sorry for my delay.
Gotta love traffic.
Yep.
Okay. If you are a visitor and plan on speaking on an agenda item, please be sure to sign a public meeting comments form and bring that here to the desk. And we will move on to number 5, reports from subcommittee, education. Reinhardt.
No major events since our last meeting. We're just kind of watching to see how the changes we submitted in the previous 2 meetings are going through the process.
One thing I will say we need to get the ball rolling sooner rather than later is getting some SMEs together for the SOP course we want to wants to write the subject matter for.
Okay.
So before you know it, the deadline will be here and we will have not done it. So we just need to get kind of started on that. I would assume that they would be at least involved in that.
And that's kind of similar to the depth that we have on the legal and ethics side.
The same thing, be a 4-hour course, focus on the SOP.
Okay.
Updating as needed. And
We have a curriculum developer on staff now that can help write,
Perfect.
write the actual course content.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
if you can put that on your agenda, start possibly get some subject matter experts involved.
Who, as far as selecting some of those, is it done by staff or vented through staff?
No, it's, you would give us an idea of who you think would be eligible, and then we can reach out to them and see if they're willing to serve.
Just who can contribute,
Yeah.
really, that would have the skill set
Yeah.
and it's
Right.
detail oriented,
Okay. How much involvement do we want? I mean, do we want to say a minimum of a couple of the inspector? I mean, we have a education subcommittee.
I think as long as you don't have a quorum, you should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, my
Okay.
thought is the committee would be involved, but there'd be a couple other people as well
Okay.
from the outside that you might think could
That's-
weigh in on.
That's
this.
what I thought. I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
make sure we're on the same.
subcommittee plus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it.
All right, SOP subcommittee.
We had a short phone conversation 2 weeks ago, I believe, with Diane, Sean, and myself, and Tony came on. Just some simple discussion on how to approach the SOP from some confusion I had on which material should be left in, which material should be taken out. No resolution from the conversation, but we're gathering SOPs from ASHE and Internashi to kind of see how they've drafted theirs and potentially would use that information as a guideline. After this meeting, we'll set up another SOP meeting where I think we'll make some headway at this point.
I don't think you were here when the announcement was made that Diana's resigned.
Sorry, no. So as far as her absence, moving forward with just 2 on the subcommittee, would we want to assign another inspector who's currently on the inspector advisory committee to that committee?
My thought process on that, and we can certainly have a discussion about it. My thought process on it, being that we're coming into the holidays and we have our January meeting where the committees get shuffled and reorganized and whatnot anyway, would be to hold off on having another meeting and try and coordinate people through holidays and schedules and everything else, and then kind of pick it up in January, however the committees kind of fall out as far as who's on what subcommittee, and kind of go from there with a fresh year and a fresh start and just kind of get that going like gangbusters. That would be my thought process on it.
My apprehension with that would be I'm almost 2 years into this process and really nothing's been accomplished.
Right.
And that's very frustrating for me. I, this weekend, went in and rewrote the entire standards and generalized it. I need to present that to Sean and to a potential other inspector on the committee to see if that's the direction that we as a subcommittee believe that the advisory committee has directed us to go in. And if it is, then we may be close to making a move forward. So I'd like to meet before the end of the year, if all possible, just because I've got a little momentum going and waiting 3 more months to tell what's going to happen between now and then.
Okay. I want to respect the work that you've done, but I also see that from our perspective, we've started this review 2 years ago and not a lot of headway has been made. But if you feel that you've made a lot in this last one and want to push that forward, I want to do that. Did you say that you?
I can help out.
I really just need to get it into y'all's hands to look at it.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need a meeting to do that, do we?
No.
So I could just forward it over to you for your review, and I just
Okay.
need to know if that's the direction we're going in as a group. If it is, then I can move forward.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we get it to Sean and to Steve? And you guys take a look at it, and then at our January meeting, when we go through it and go through the reorganization, at least we'll have that to start off with. So however that unfolds for next year, with those committees, they'll have a baseline at least to go forward with. Because I don't want to waste the time and effort that you've put into it, especially if you've made some good headway in this last quarter. So. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Enforcement Subcommittee. So I'm assuming the Enforcement Subcommittee has not met. I wanted to kind of talk about this one. I have never seen the Enforcement Subcommittee meet in 7 years, not one. So my thought process on this is we either need to figure out a direction or a purview for the Enforcement Subcommittee, or it just needs to go away. Because it's really pointless to have a committee that never, ever, ever meets. You know, we're kind of going through the motions and spinning the wheel. So
the last thing they did is we made the penalty matrix.
Right.
Which is
a
been a
long time
while.
ago.
Yep.
Long time ago. So I also kind of look, and every meeting or every time the disciplinary actions come out and whatnot, my email and phone starts blowing up with, what does this mean? What about this? And we're looking through, we look through the report every time that come from staff. And a lot of us here on the committee may know what they're talking about, but it's going out to other inspectors and to the general public, and a lot of it is just gobbledygook, for lack of a better term. And you look at some of these, the file numbers and the disposition, some of them have links that you can actually click on and go directly to those file numbers and see the information, and some of them do not. Now, some of them, the ones that don't, appear to have just advisory letters, and maybe I'm assuming that's the reason why there isn't an order there. But when you have one that says advisory letter and the reason is performed an inspection in a negligent or incompetent manner, I look at enforcement as a means for inspectors to learn, to really look through these enforcement actions to go, somebody did this, it may be something that I'm doing and I better not do this. And, it's kind of a training tool. But if we can't utilize that as a training tool for that, then it's just, hey, who screwed up and what did they do? I would rather look at it not of a neener type thing of this person did this. I'd rather people look at it as, hey, this is something that somebody was doing. Let's make sure not only I'm not doing it, but my colleagues aren't doing it. It's something to make our industry better. So I don't know how we can incorporate possibly the enforcement subcommittee to that, to the point of maybe where the enforcement subcommittee meets once a quarter with staff to go over what's going to be in there, and possibly look at verbiage or wording of how that's in there to make that clearer for everybody so we know exactly what's going on. I mean, those are just my thoughts, and I just want to throw it out there during this point and certainly get the staff's input on it, because I don't want to throw any more burden on the staff. I know you guys got a full plate with everything you got going on, but my hope here is kind of, one, give the enforcement committee some purpose, and two, kind of clean up some of the stuff that comes up every single quarter where we're asking, hey, what does this mean? Why is this in like this? Hopefully kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah. I agree with you. If there's a subcommittee that's not meeting or doing anything, it has no purpose. And then if you need to appoint one, you can always appoint one as the chair to look at specific issues. On the list of documents, one thing that the committee could consider is whether to even list advisory letters. They're usually more focused on one individual, and it's more didn't rise to the level of formal discipline. And maybe you just look at the people who are actually being disciplined, because that's the stuff that really matters. Okay. Like on the broker sales side, which is hundreds of thousands of people, advisory letters, unless someone does a specific public information request, that never goes out, and that might be a better approach for these things that are considered a little more minor. So that's an option.
So, other people's thoughts?
I like the idea of getting some back information before we get to, I'm on the enforcement, are you on it?
No.
Who else is on the enforcement committee, subcommittee?
Previously,
You were on it previously.
I was previously, yeah.
So, I mean,
It's
we get those
TBA,
questions.
TBA on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, every time in the last 7 years that something's come up, usually what happens is, the staff asks Brad, is here, about clarification on standards or
Yeah.
something of that nature. It's just never.
Or
actually went
after
to
the
committee.
meeting, yeah.
So, even the first one in their failed report is deficient roof covering materials that showed hail damage. So our SOPs don't require that we
Right.
mention hail. So first thing people ask me is, why are we now required to put hail damage on it? Well, we're not. We're required to put physical damage, to there, but there's nothing in the SOP specifically that says you got to look for hail damage.
to declare why it's damaged, yeah.
Or is perceived hail damage as physical damage.
Right, but in this disciplinary action, it specifically says hail damage. So then other inspectors read this and go, wait a minute, so I have to start looking for hail damage now, and I start getting bombarded, with stuff like that. And this is just one example, but it's,
Like when the termite issue came out, someone was disciplined for not,
Right.
they didn't write up the damage, but we didn't know until we got to the meeting what they were, it just said they didn't write up termite damage.
temperature differential on the HVAC. There is no standard in our SOPs that say what that temperature differential should be, but yet it's, someone's being disciplined for it. So it raises a lot of questions from other inspectors and from the public when that stuff comes up. And then we don't get to hear about it really until this meeting. But if we had something that was there, if we had a subcommittee that, perhaps worked with staff, say a month before this meeting happens to give it ample time, or even 2 to 3 weeks, whatever the case may be, to where maybe we look at the verbiage of what's going to go in there and make sure that it aligns with what the SOP is. So an inspector that's reading that would understand very clearly why that person was disciplined.
I've always thought that the enforcement committee was involved in all this disciplinary stuff, but that's just a staff thing, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
We read about it just like everybody
I
else.
will say, sorry to interrupt. This is a snapshot of stuff. Basically, even on advisor letters, they may have complained about a myriad of things.
Yeah.
And even the advisor letter, if you put it out there, it won't necessarily, it's to educate that actual license holder
Mhm.
on one issue they may have missed or something like that.
Right.
It's not formal disciplinary action. And traditionally, we're just work with you guys on these issues. If you feel there's some improvement, we're more than open to hear it, but we have certain requirements in closing cases and keeping closed. You guys meet quarterly, so we can't have holding up issues on that type of stuff because it would really mess up our measures and what we have to report to the legislature. So that's,
Do you think
Thing
it's
is
worth
factor.
we got, if the
I mean-
subcommittee got on the phone with y'all, like, right before our meeting, so we get clarification on stuff, or,
That's why he's here,
yeah.
to give that clarification here.
So what was the purpose of that subcommittee even being created?
To look at rules that deal with enforcement issues,
Okay.
and we just don't amend those very often.
Okay.
As I don't remember who said the last time we did it was the penalty mechanism,
Yeah,
which
years.
was an enforcement-based rule, but that's really what its purpose is.
Okay.
In terms of staff calling someone on that committee to talk about stuff, that wasn't I don't think directly related to the responsibilities of that committee. It's just that person happened to be someone that staff could get information from.
So I would have no problem with enforcement becoming a task force as opposed to subcommittee, to where they're appointed as needed, like you talked about. Well, you're in. I have no problem. I also have no problem with getting rid of the advisory letters on that stuff, because I agree,
Yeah.
but it's not really giving any information anyway. Nobody's gonna learn anything from it, so why even be there? So the only thing that still leaves it for me, and I'd like to see us find a way to fix, is specifically the reasons for disciplinary actions as they get posted. Because inevitably I get calls and emails on those every time those come out about the verbiage and whatnot. Now, granted, I know staff has bigger fish to fry than how something is specifically worded.
and we also put it on the website at that moment when we publish the order. So, and that needs to be done on a fairly tight deadline. So this report there's actual language on the website we use as well when we have that.
So it goes.
It may go hand in hand. This language may be
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
similar to what we have on the website. So we need that within like a day or two. I mean, if you see some issues, we could clear it up. I mean, we try to pick and choose the language as best as we can, based upon the facts.
Is it,
That's why now we have the links there, so that actually gives you the facts that the license holder admitted to. That was the basis of the violation. So that should actually give you a better picture.
is the language unique to every case, or is it, do you pick from a variety of options? I feel like I haven't asked that question very well, but is it kind of generic?
It's not boilerplate unless it's like a specific, like, technical violation.
Okay.
Like
Failure to register.
failure to DBA.
Yeah.
But if it's factual based, like even for our other license holders, we're gonna give some sort of context to it.
Yeah.
My belief and what a lot of people in the field think, that the enforcement subcommittee would be utilized like subject matter experts on alleged infractions by inspectors. You know, you get an allegation, the idea in the field that there aren't actual inspectors making these decisions or involved in it, you know, we're all after the fact. I think that's kind of the belief that they would be used, like you said, call Brad every once in a while when you don't understand something. That's kind of the belief that we
That's
thought,
what we've used Brad in the past.
Yeah.
and,
but it
you know,
doesn't happen very often. I mean,
Well, I mean,
Well-
just from a lawyer perspective, I, as an advisory committee,
Just-
you should not be in the business of specific enforcement actions other than as that subject matter expert.
that's when I came on board, I think the first time I was voted or assigned into the enforcement committee, that was what I was led to believe, that, okay, as the allegations come through, it would be one of those, can you explain this? Not making a decision or anything, but can you help me understand why, you know, these clients think that this is a infraction by the inspector? And is it really, is it serious? You know, things that give it some weight from the inspector side. And that was the belief. And I know, you know, talking with Brad, he would get those calls every once in a while, whether he was on the enforcement committee, because he was kind of known as the person that would know those type of things.
I agree with Stephen that would be the purpose, a legitimate, helpful purpose.
Yeah.
If the enforcement committee were a group of actual licensed inspectors, as the SMEs, that would refer an opinion to the legal department on their perspective on what went wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
Is
judged
it really
by three of
wrong?
my peers,
Yeah.
honestly, someone who does what I do and when a complaint is filed.
And one thing we're required by law, not just for inspectors, but for broker sales agents, is to separate the day-to-day responsibility for the duties assigned by the legislature from sort of the policy making. So y'all would say we're maybe being too, you could recommend we're being too strict, less strict. The SOPs need to be more specific, less specific. But typically the people who either set policy or recommend policy, y'all are recommending policy, y'all wouldn't be involved on any specific cases because that's the day-to-day management. So that the law requires a real separation on that.
And we wouldn't even know that. I mean, I wouldn't need to know who it was or anything. It's just like, is this something an inspector has to do? And to what degree? Or if he did this?
Well, I'm wondering if, I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
I'm wondering if part of the reason why that committee, or really just members of this advisory group, is receiving fewer calls is that we have lawyers who are doing these inspection cases who have gone to the expert enough to where they just sort of know what your answer would be. And like
and that's-
And we,
develop.
I've been doing this, what, 7
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
The other attorney that does it, Tony Renteria, he's been doing it for almost 5 years. You know,
Yeah.
so we have questions. And also we have to think about it is we have to prove it too. And I know, I mean, none of you guys are lawyers, but if there's something there, but there's no evidence, then we may not be calling you because that's just someone's allegation and there's no proof otherwise. And it may be something horrible that happened, but if we don't have the proof to prove it up, then we can't proceed either on those situations.
And that's
But
probably
we reach out quite, I
at
mean,
some point, you may move to another position, and do we have this kind of policy or something in place that says, okay, we are here to help the person that may replace you or something? But it is true, you've seen thousands of these allegations come through, and at some point, you kind of know what the answers probably would be.
So that's, I mean, that's,
90 cases a year, so.
right. And I mean, like I said, my goal is not putting more burden on the staff, not by any means, but if we're not using it, it just needs to go away. And I mean, we haven't used it. I mean, I understand when we had the penalty matrix thing come up and whatnot, but if something like that comes up, we can create a task force and specifically deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Those things come up because obviously they don't come up very often. One other thing that that I would like to see resolved is some of the stuff, and it's certainly, it's usually like one, maybe two on these reports that come out. Like this one, just this particular meeting, how we have the very first one says roof covering materials that showed hail damage. Well, there's nothing in our standards that say you have to look for hail damage. So somebody reading that, I mean, if I know, I may be just nitpicking a little bit, but somebody that sees that, an inspector that sees that, they go, whoa, I have to put hail damage now? And now they start questioning, going back, instead of if it just said shows physical damage.
So it seems to me
And
that
if you click on the order, it physically says here, shows the day that it's significant hail damage to the surface of the roof,
Which is physical damage.
which is physical damage.
Mhm.
So it should have been noted.
I'm
So
not-
this is why I'm saying clicking on the
I'm
order
not questioning whether
or
that
jumping
should have
ahead
been
before
an
clicking
issue or
on
not.
the
It
order.
should have been a disciplinary action.
it
Yeah.
seems like the disconnect here is that inspectors out on the field see and disciplinary action taken on one inspector, and they immediately say, this applies to everybody.
Right.
When this is a case-by-case thing. This isn't some sort of dictate from the agency saying this is how we are now viewing the SOPs. This is a fact-based decision on what happened here. And I don't know how to clear, that seems like that's where the real disconnect is. How do you clear that up, that this does not necessarily mean that a little statement on the report that all inspectors now have to look for something they didn't before?
And I'm like I said, I'm using that as an example. We've had other ones that come up before that was the temperature differential, which isn't in our standard. And it was specifically, now if you open the order, you can see that there was other issues with that, and that's what caused it. But I guess I just like to see this reason in this particular report that comes out, because people will see that.
In defense of the subcommittee, I'm always looking for incentives to be here, which there are very few, very few. And
Thanks.
one of the, it's work, it's a lot of work. We all have busy lives and families. And it moves along slowly sometimes. So I'm always looking for incentives to be here and to attract other inspectors to serve. And one of the things that if we were to move the subject matter expert component into an advisory role with the legal department to help run some of this past, because we're experts. I mean, 7 and 5 years interviewing inspectors is a duration of time, but you can move on to another position and another new attorney can come in, and they have no experience with this. And after 22 years of doing this, I'm still learning every day, and I'm sure we all are. We see something new that's a little odd, if we figure it out, and we report on it. So having those ongoing field experiences, I think, are a wealth of knowledge to help control the damage that may be caused by the written opinions that are being put out to our community. Because I agree with you, they can be frightening, and they can begin to make other inspectors believe that there are things that they have to do that are not within the standards because of the citing that you've done with the example.
But is that enough? Like I said, I agree. I love having the subject matter experts on there, and we've talked about that with the new SOP course coming in. But do we actually need a subcommittee that is never going to meet?
Well, it would only meet on that behalf as the experts in order to advise the legal department. That's the only way I could see it happening on an ongoing
But that
basis.
happens maybe, from my experience, and just being on the committee once a year, maybe once a year.
Because asking Brad out, who's outside of the committee now, I think is a stretch.
Well, I don't think they're doing that now.
No.
It was just when he was here, they would ask Brad because he was happened to be on the report, and usually it was.
And do you need a committee in order for staff to reach out to any inspector
And
on
that's
or do you
right.
need a subcommittee for the staff to reach out to any inspector on the committee to ask their opinion about it?
I think you want that to happen much quicker and more fluid
And to
than,
have a separate committee meeting and announce it and all that
Anybody,
stuff.
I think anybody on the inspector
I
committee,
agree.
I mean, by virtue of being selected here, you're kind of believed to be a subject matter expert, and any of us, the idea that you couldn't get hold of one of 6 of us,
Well, truth be told, if I'm staff and I have a question about that, and most of it comes back to SOPs, if you don't have the enforcement subcommittee, I'm going to go to somebody on the SOP committee.
I was advised to abolish the committee and
That would be my.
recommend reinstituting it when necessary, or a task force when necessary. Because if
there's no
not
rule
been
required.
effective in the past, there's no reason for it to be present.
Yeah, I don't think there's an actual rule required for us to have that committee, right?
I don't think so.
So I know there's more of a discussion we probably wanted to have on this one little particular item, but it's one of those things that's kind of bugged me for a while. I've been here for 7 years. I've never seen that committee meet. It's if it's not meeting, let's just get rid of it and move on and be more productive. That's what we're doing.
That's more assets than the other two.
There you go. And in January, when we do restructuring, maybe we can look at, because we only have 2 subcommittees, possibly putting an extra person on one of those other 2 subcommittees to give some more support to them.
We could do that. That's not a forum.
Yeah. Because we can go up to 4, right? As long as it's not 5.
Total of 9.
Yeah.
So, yes, sir.
Since we had the relationship with Brad before, is there someone willing to be like the more point person? Because when you go through anatomy of a complaint, jumping from one inspector to another, it's better just to have better rapport with one inspector is like the main one, and then have some backup.
I would say the chair.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Set up as the chair.
You direct the
Yeah,
committee.
I don't think that's a problem. Whoever the chair
Always
is, set that
defer it
up.
out.
And I know we're using Steve as a resource for upcoming case.
Yeah.
As well.
As long as you're using it for that case, then fine. Going forward, we use the chair, and then
But it's
it
just,
should be good.
yeah, I'm just.
Because in theory, the chair should have enough experience on the committee before they've been chair anyway, to have a good base knowledge of what's going on anyway.
Like we voted him king.
Where is your friend?
All right. So, all right, so is everybody okay with just getting rid of the enforcement subcommittee?
What do we need to do officially?
Motion.
Motion?
Make a motion that we get rid of the, enforcement subcommittee.
Motion's made. Second?
Second.
Here, a second. Any other discussion on this item? Yes, sir.
Randall native property inspection. Just like he was stating, it's, to me, when I see these penalties come out and they get specific like that, and then it's not in the SOP, to me, the penalty should have been just there with physical damage. It shouldn't go into, it was hail damage, it should be just physical damage. It should relate to the SOP as it is. And that's what it should be based on. I've got, AC is another one. I've got 3 different HVAC data, and I can get 3 different temperature differentials from these guys. So when you see the stuff come down and you see one, and you know an HVAC guy has given you another, then there's problems in that scenario.
It sounds like the way to handle that, though, is for the SOP committee to clarify in our standards of practice. If we want to resolve that issue or other issues that come up in disciplinary, then when we're changing the SOPs, we clarify what it wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole big can of worms.
Right.
In there. My whole thing on this is just to make sure that the reason for disciplinary action that gets
Yeah.
published out, that little blurb is the first thing everybody
Yeah.
reads, and makes calls and whatnot from that, is in direct correlation with what the standards are. Okay. Any other discussion on that item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. All right. Staff reports, AMS.
Well, are you gonna talk about, I was just gonna say, this is the first meeting since the rule change that we're now allowing CE for every inspector meeting. I mean, it's 2 hours, but you can get it at any inspector meeting, so hoping there'd be more people here, but
4, right? Up to 4 for renewal period?
4?
Yeah.
I think it's up to 4 per renewal.
4 hours.
Every renewal period, but you have to stay the whole time
Right.
for the amount of time in the meeting,
Yeah.
right?
Right, and I believe it's just one, it's not an accrual of 4 over different meetings, it's whatever that meeting is, right?
I don't think that-
agree.
I don't
I
think that
think
was
it
ever
can be an
said.
accrual.
I think it could be in the rule. I don't think it was ever specified
It was
that
not.
it wasn't.
All right.
So if you go to 2 meetings that are 2 hours, you
Anyway.
still get the 4.
The 4.
Anyway, this is the first meeting that this has been opened up to every meeting rather than just the one in the beginning of the year. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Anyone listening, anyone watching later, that come to the meeting.
Physically,
Physically.
yeah.
Be physically here, come to the meetings, you get CE.
Can I introduce Mike Hovey?
Sure.
This is our education team member, Mike Hovey, and he is monitoring any sign-in and sign-out for CE credit.
All right.
We're glad to have him here.
We appreciate your time being here, but is there any way to proxy that over to the chair so he can do it for you?
He just loves blowing his up, man.
I'll find out more for you to do by the end.
I have a license. Okay.
Good.
Good.
And
No,
then I was looking at you to give this report, but this is the first meeting that this group has had since our executive director announced his retirement. So we're in the are seeking the next person to be executive director, if that job is currently posted, receiving applications.
So March 2020 is when.
Right. So, yeah. The March 22nd, I think, is.
I think March 30th is what,
30th?
I think 30th is the actual cutoff, but yeah,
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I think that.
So we're hoping for some significant overlap between him and.
So you're recruiting from this committee, is that what you're saying?
We are accepting applications.
Don't open that
I
up.
nominate the chair. And then one, I didn't want to step on you.
No, I'm finished.
Just so everyone knows, I'd like to keep everyone posted or informed about this. I went to the PREA conference last week. I think it was in College Station. Steve was there.
Yep.
Brad, don't know if anyone else from the committee or committee related was there, but I was there Thursday and Friday. Had a booth. We had the SOPs, the pocket SOPs printed up. People came by, vented, among other things. And, yeah, so it was nice. So just another, trying to get that relationship built. Let's make people see a face of the agency, be able to feel comfortable talking to us about things, get stakeholders involved. So it was good. I appreciate the invite from Tafria. So.
If you get another invite in the future, would it be, I'm just wondering, would it be advantageous to have some of the committee members that maybe as part?
You see where he's going with this, right? You see where he's going with this.
If we're attending the conference,
Yeah,
would it be
and that's
helpful to sit with you at the
that's
table
what-
and answer questions?
Yeah, that's what happens. I
Good,
mean,
good.
typically if there's committee members there, they'll come and they'll stand and just, laugh as inspectors come by and go, look who's here,
We're lucky they weren't like rental paintball guns.
Yeah, exactly. But, no, I think it's always helpful if you're attending the meeting or if it happens to be in a town that you live in, any committee member is good. It's good to have, that kind of interaction. Again, it's about building that relationship and having stakeholders feel comfortable to be present and be involved in the process.
And you've made yourself available at, not just the annual conference, but monthly meetings.
Yeah, I'm
and
working
things like that
with
when
one of
they're-
their Central Texas, trying to get a meeting set, and I'm open to do that at other places, time permitting, to go speak at other places as well. But
Would you promote us seeking out that same opportunity with our cities and with the meetings that they have, speak in front of the inspectors?
sure, I don't see why that would be great. I think they would appreciate that.
They used to have, I think a lot of Terry's kind of going away. I know North Texas Terry has dissolved. They actually created a new trade association up there, which Randall Needham is here for today. I specifically go to those meetings just so that somebody from the committee, and I started doing that years ago, just so that somebody from the committee is on there, because the first couple meetings that I started going to, whether it be Terry or Tafria or whatever the case may be, there was a lot of misinformation that was going out, that was being presented as coming from this committee, and it wasn't even close to what that was. So it serves as a good way to increase the communication between this committee and the inspectors on the ground to do that. It'll never be completely fixed, but I would highly encourage to go to those. I think it's just,
And I don't think we need any permission from the committee
No,
to do
no,
it.
no,
We
not at
just
all.
go knowing that.
I would encourage it. Just don't be like on their board of directors, whatnot, you start to get into.
Absolutely. I would think if the committee is okay with this, in the event that we get someone who reaches out to us and wants someone to be present representing the agency in the committee, if someone on staff can't do it, if the committee would be open for me to reach out to you guys and say, hey, there's someone in your neck of the woods,
Absolutely.
they're having a meeting, do you mind going? And they just want to talk about what's going on in the committee. And again, really helpful. It really helps with that relationship. Again, I really want to thank Tafria for their hospitality. It was good.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think based on what Stephen's doing with education and what we're doing with SOP and any future big projects we're working on, we really need to get stakeholder
Absolutely.
cooperation. So going to these meetings, I would prefer to have the permission of the committee I'm representing to attend and speak for them as opposed to just going around.
I think we all have.
Yeah, I think as long as you go knowing that you're representing the committee as a whole, and really a reflection on the Texas Real Estate Commission, as long as you take that perspective, should be fine. If it's somebody asks you for an individual opinion, just clarify your individual opinion, so on and so forth. But I mean, and the reason I even, mention that specifically is because there's trade associations put out a survey to all their members and all inspectors that they had addresses for, and this survey really insinuated some things that this body and this, the real estate commission was not doing in any way, shape, or form. And they were using it as a means to motivate their members, or motivate to get new members maybe, or motivate activity. And I think it was in bad taste that it was done. Yes,
Inciting.
it was very inciting. And I think it was in bad taste it was done, but I think if we could get out to some of these associations and kind of cure that before it becomes an issue. But there was obviously, based on this survey, there was a lot of information that should not have been going out to their members. That was not what was discussed.
Well, I do want to be careful, though, and not let Chelsea weigh on this. I don't want to speak out of turn. That I really think that in terms of speaking for the committee, I mean, can anybody do that, or is that really the chair's duty?
That's the chair.
Yeah.
And I mean,
So-
you're an advisory committee.
Right.
So you
Well, I would-
provide advice to the commission, and anything beyond that, I think, really should be left.
So again, I don't want to discourage people from being there to be a resource. I think that's good, but I think maybe just to be on the safe side, just contact us and say, hey, there's a thing I want to go to. We can let the chair know, kind of just run all the traps and then go through that. I just want to make sure that we're not, that we're covering all of our bases.
That's perfectly fine. I like procedures like that to know what I need to do in order to.
We're not making decisions, but we're just letting them know firsthand.
Right.
What has been discussed and what decisions
You don't
are
want
going
someone
on.
out there like Fred Wilcox going rogue, and the next thing you know, there's 400 people at the committee meeting going, committee member said, Fred, if you're listening, I'm joking.
We love you, Fred.
But it's just, and this isn't the first time that I've seen this stuff come through where, these inciting emails come through to try and get people.
I think as an extension of just disseminating firsthand information
Yeah,
is,
The thing is,
should be, what we're here for.
right.
and I mean, a lot of these issues were clarified in the Trek Insider very clearly, very distinctly, but it was still
Misinterpreted.
okay. Fair enough. All right, is that it for me, then?
I think so. I don't have anything else to do, Chelsea?
Standard and, sorry, go ahead.
No, we already covered it, Diana, retiring.
Standards and enforcement services.
Good morning. Jeff here is pretty long report. The reason why it's long is because it encompasses everything we did in 2019. So like usual, the first 2 pages is what we've done since the last complaint. And then the subsequent pages are all 2019. And then the last page is basically the start of our 2020 report.
So were you recommending to not post the advisory letters?
Right.
Was that okay.
Okay. We're going for,
That would be my recommendation. I mean, it's just, there's really, because it's
Are they-
limited information and they can't get, there's not a link on there and
Is there,
advisory letters.
if we were curious about advisory letters, because there is a training value to them, are they available on the website?
no, they're not available in any brokers or sales. It's informal disciplinary action. I mean,
But it's still something you could learn from. Really?
when you look at them, you're going to need the whole case
Okay.
to actually understand. So that's why it's specifically written, the advisory letter, it's addressed to
Okay.
that license holder and say, in this situation, this stuff happened. We think maybe you need to be aware in the future to do something a little better.
So we're
I mean,
not really
some are real minor things that just fall into that negligence category.
It's like unauthorized.
It's not an SOP issue.
Right.
It's, what? He disregarded a directive in there that you cannot go in there right now. Person was in there, I remember they're in the shower or something like that.
Right.
And the agent specifically told him on the phone, you need to wait, you're gonna get access, and he just totally disregarded it and went in there on his own. So we said, don't do that.
Kind of in the caution zone.
Yeah.
That's one of those where you don't need the whole backstory. It's just,
Yeah.
if it's an advisory letter, it was a minor infraction, it was something that wasn't a big, huge, it was just, hey, slap
Okay.
on the wrist, you shouldn't have done it.
So it'll shorten this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the ones that have formal disciplinary action, there's absolute proof of a violation. Advisory letters are kind of in that area where there's something there, but it could be construed as a violation, but maybe not quite there, or it's some like slap on the wrist type of thing. I think on average, when I was looking at the 2019 report, it's about the same amount of discipline we give, you know, statistically. So,
Anybody have any questions for?
yeah, I think about 90 complaints open again this year, almost about that. It's been the trend the past 3 years, I think.
It's really not bad considering our numbers have been increased, so percentage-wise. that's just-
I mean, there was like 60, like stagnant for, or then it's, you know, really for several years, but yeah, with the increase of, you know, activity overall for the agency, it's gone same as all our other license holder complaints. So.
And then at the last commission meeting, you guys show how long it is between initial complaint and actually completion, and that's been shortened quite a bit too, if memory serves, as far as being able to get
Statistics
through.
overall, yes.
Yeah.
We opened
A lot.
overall
Close to 6,000.
6,000, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Quite a bit. Good. Anything else?
no.
Education and examination services.
So, my apologies, this didn't get included with the materials that were sent out. But Amber, if you would open the third PDF there. So, we've started a new fiscal year. So this is the exam, inspector exam activity report for, actually, nope. Oh, no, you're right. Just comparison from September 2018 and September 2019. So we're just looking at, you know, like a 1 month snapshot of last year versus this year. And we'll be building on this for fiscal year 2020. So you'll see add-ons to this. But, you know, as compared to 2018, we had 4 real estate inspector examinations passed, 36 professional inspector examinations passed this month, a total of 72 examinations taken for professional inspector and 5 for real estate inspector. And if you look down toward the bottom, the average exam pass rate for the professional inspector is 50%, the applicant pass rate is 55.4%, and the first attempt pass rate is 43.01%, up from 34.5% last year. And then if there are no questions, I've also compiled, the second is the top PDF. And this is an overall comparison from the entirety of fiscal year for 2018 to 2019. So you see we also have an upward trend of exam pass rate at the bottom, up from 50.2% to 54.2%. And then the first attempt pass rate for professional inspectors has stayed pretty much on target. And if you don't have any questions, that concludes my report for this committee.
Anybody have any questions? All right. Licensing and registration services.
Pamela Carter, I'm sitting in for the sample. For the applications received, you can see that it's down a little over 15% for the original applications received. For the renewal activity, we're down a couple of percent for this fiscal year compared to the previous. And then on the next page, the professional inspectors, the active license holders, for them, they went up 80 compared to the previous August. And for the total active license holders, inspector license holders is up 76. And the total inspectors was up 64 from previous August. And that concludes my update.
Anybody have any questions on that? Item number 7, discussion and possible action regarding 22 TAC 535.216, renewal of license.
This is mine. We should have brought this to you at the last inspector committee meeting. This is part of implementation from the legislative session. There's not particularly specific to inspectors, but it amends the inspector rules. So I failed to put it on the agenda last time, and so we postponed proposing it to the commission in August so that y'all would have an opportunity to review it. So I just kind of wanted you to have that context. But the rule looks like it does a whole lot more than it does, and that is because it has been substantially rewritten really just for readability and transparency, clarity sake. It makes only, and you'll see from, the blue type to the, red type, we're adding the blue, we're getting rid of the red. You'll see that there's more numbering and lettering rather than just whole paragraphs. That's the main difference, is just to order things in a way that's easier to read. But it does do two substantive things. It eliminates the consideration of student loan defaults when you're renewing a license, and that's because there is a Senate Bill 37 that prohibits us from considering that now. So we have already stopped considering it, but this rule is just following how we've changed our practice. And then similarly, in our sunset legislation, Senate Bill 624, we received authorization for the commission to deny a license renewal if a license holder is in violation of a commission order. They didn't pay part of their fee and related to discipline, something like that. So we have made that change in many other places in our rules for the other license holders in license types, and need to make this change to conform the inspector rules with our other rules. That won't change our practice in any substantial way, but it does give us a little bit more teeth in an enforcement action. That's all this does. I'd like to be able to say that this group recommends the change to the commission. So I would recommend that you recommend these changes.
Well, it's easy to read through now that it's been renumbered and everything else. I mean, everything's just kind of broken up a little easier. And then I thought the denial of renewal or reinstatement. Anybody have any questions on agenda item 7? No. Entertain a motion to forward the proposal to the commissioners.
I recommend that we forward the changes to specifically the 535-216 to the commission.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second's been made. Any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 8. Discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments relating to military applicants and license holders as follows. 20 CPAC 535-208, applications for license.
So we don't have a 535-58 third party materials, but what essentially every session the legislature proposes changes to make it easier for people who are active military or their spouses to get employed in the state of Texas if they're deployed here. So with that in mind, because they had done something, they had passed a bill this session that would require some reciprocity for military spouses, we thought we would just pull all the military related things and put them in their own rule, which is 535-58. And essentially just refer back to that, so we have one place to deal with that whenever those changes are made, rather than having to look for various places throughout the statute where we need to address those changes. Just have it in one place and then have the rules point back to it. That's essentially what this does. All of these things that are stricken are actually in that particular rule, 535-58, and it just
We're just taking them out of 208, putting them in 50.
right, unless there's specific things in this rule that apply to that.
So what's the reason for keeping 208 is there a need for?
208 deals with significantly more than just, the military stuff. It's
Okay.
application for licensure.
Oh,
The
okay.
component of the application for licensure was the military, the exceptions for active military, a vet, or a spouse. So we just pulled all that and put that in
Okay.
535-58 and point to that rule instead. We've done that with some of the education stuff as well, in the past. It just makes it easier. Whenever there's a statutory change, we don't have to search the rules and make sure that everything matches, because if we miss something, then there's an issue.
Well, this will get one page, real short.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Chelsea?
No, the new rule, 535.58,
Uh-huh.
where all of this language is shifting, does apply to inspectors.
Right.
And it also includes, the changes required by the bill for reciprocity. And I think that we are going to want to watch that very closely to see how those rules can be utilized. The rules require, well, the law requires us to grant reciprocity for a military spouse who has a license in another state or territory with substantially similar requirements. It allows them to practice in Texas really without
Without a license.
a license. So that's a substantial shift for Texas.
Yeah.
The substantially similar requirement is a question. Who has substantially similar requirements? Well, today, nobody.
No, yeah.
But after after we implement the changes to the pre-license education requirements, then maybe. So that's just kind of something to sit out there and watch.
And it's not open-ended. It's for a specific time period. They can operate without a license.
Like only if they're
I
license,
believe it's-
expires at the end of this year, then they can do it at the end of this
Right,
year, but they
right.
have to renew.
And it's also for the time period that their spouse is stationed, or is it 3 years?
Yeah, or no more than 3
No
years.
more than 3 years.
Do you
So it
even
is
know they're
capped.
practicing here?
They have to register with us that they're doing it. They
It's a
have to,
verification.
yeah.
But
And
so they don't have to take the Texas module or know anything about the Texas SOP?
well,
Correct.
well, no, they do. They have to be. It has
They
to be.
still have to follow
it has
the
to be
rules.
substantively similar.
Yeah.
So to the extent that there's another state that doesn't have requirements similar to ours, it's questionable whether this would apply.
Yeah.
So I agree with Chelsea. It's just something we need to watch. But the way the rule is set up is, so the statute authorizes the agency to give them a license. It just can't be based on requirements such that, because they can by statute operate without one. So the way we have it set up is we would essentially have a verification process, and if they met all the requirements and they were substantially, we would in fact issue them a license with us. It also makes sense. If you're operating in the state of Texas, you don't have a license, people are going to go, I'm not using you, and that's not the purpose of it.
Because we kind of dropped that type of thing with the professional engineers and letting them do track home inspections without a license.
Right.
It wasn't being utilized, really.
Right, but this is for a very narrowly specific thing. This is someone's been stationed in Texas,
Yeah.
they're married to that person, they've been operating someplace else in order to help them transition and do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And it's going to apply to different licensing agencies in a different way.
Yeah.
We have fairly specific requirements. Again, once our pre-licensing goes into effect, we'll have to reconsider how all that works for inspectors, but they still may not meet those requirements.
I don't think it'll be the Wild West by
Right.
any means,
No.
but it's just something to watch for. And if someone comes with a request to practice in Texas under these rules, then we'll coordinate that with
Right.
y'all, and we'll report that to you.
Right.
Because we've got a challenge still with Texas inspectors not using the right forms and SOP to have other states that have never seen a Texas form or
And
SOP.
And the other requirement, just again, so that, as Shelby says, not the Wild West, they have to meet they have to follow the law. Just because they're operating under this doesn't mean they're willing. They have to use the report, they have to follow the SOPs, they have to do all of that. All of those would be requirements if in fact they were operating under that particular provision.
But
how
not
do we
having
know they're
trained here,
using?
well, and not having trained here, they've never demonstrated the fact that they even know
And-
that.
and all
If you
likelihood,
do something in another place, you're subject to the laws in that local area, and that's basically the same thing here. They're just saying if you come in under these stipulations, yes, you can technically do a home inspection, but you're still subject to technical,
Yeah.
you still have to do you still have to follow the SOPs and do the.
You better be very, very careful.
But the ones here, we're reasonably sure they're familiar there is a license because they've been through training, whereas there's no trigger to see if these licensees, or we haven't decided, I guess, whether or not they would be required to take the Texas module and know there is a form and everything exists.
Now, the reason for this law is to allow military spouses to have an opportunity to make a living while their spouse is stationed in a particular place, which is a huge disadvantage for military spouses who are trained with any sort of license. So this is intended to be utilized to be very helpful for a population that is desperately in need of it, are fairly small, not that many people, and hopefully use great care in exercising this privilege.
I have a few worries about this. One is if they're registered but not licensed, there's no jurisdiction over them whatsoever by the commission.
Insurance, you're required insurance.
And not only.
They would have to have
Loss
insurance.
of
They're gonna be
insurance,
licensed
yeah.
through
They have to meet all requirements, so the only thing is that they can operate without a license. We have the authority to grant them one, which is what we're gonna do once we get the certification, but they have to meet all the other requirements. They can't, we do have authority over them. If they're doing something that doesn't meet the statutory requirements to act as a real estate inspector in Texas, we would have authority to discipline them over that. Yeah, it's
You
just
couldn't take away their license.
it's just the,
Yeah, we should,
trying to
we
make
should take
it,
away their truck license.
trying to make it easier for them to be able to, if they're uprooted from whatever state they are because their spouse has been stationed here, to allow them an easier transition. But we still have authority.
So,
The other concern I have is that, it's not open-ended, I understand that, but I don't know anyone who can move to the state of Texas and begin working in real estate inspections within the first several months. It takes a long time to get established in this business. So I'm not quite sure why this statute has passed to help in this particular matter.
It's for all licenses.
This is the wrong building for
This
that.
particular one. This particular one.
Well, we have to apply the statute the way it is. It's for all occupational licensing authorities. That's what we are. So we have to, and the likelihood of this is going to be, if it happens, going to be a small population. More likely than not, what will happen is someone will come, once the new education thing is in place, someone will come in and say, I passed the national exam. What do I need to do to operate in Texas? Take this Texas course, take the Texas exam banner. And that's likely what will happen. But there is still this other option that they come in, and we would look at it. We would have to assess it case by case.
Well, as this is being developed, I can see that there's some time frame when they can move here and practice as a home inspector without a license and probably not get a whole lot of work because it's going to take a long time to establish themselves. But I'm just worried over what time frame the non-licensed holder can go through the requirements to become licensed. It's just a little confusing for me that,
we said 3 years.
like the cosmetologist.
If you look at, and I'm sorry, it's not part of the show. If you look at 535, it talks about the process, which they'll notify us. If we determine that they meet that they're substantially similar, then we will actually issue them a TREC license so that they can operate without one, but this would make it easier because they'll have a license. We will have determined they've met similar requirements, substantially similar requirements, so that we can then provide them with a license. So they'll have that authority, and then we have the authority of them. They have to match, but that license is good. So without getting into too much detail, if they're licensed in Utah, let's say, or Montana, until February of 2020, once their license expires, whatever we issue them would expire at the same time. They would then have to reassert under this for whatever time period that license is eligible in the other state to us, and then we would do it for that same time period. So it's kind of,
The likelihood of this happening with the inspectors is maybe greater than real estate agents or brokers, but only marginally.
correct.
It's much more likely in other licensed fields where the geographic difference is minimal.
Right.
Nurses, cosmetologists, things like that. but it's a law that we had to implement
Right, sure.
with a rule.
I understand. All right, thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Entertain a motion to propose the amendment.
So this was proposed in August. This is up for adoption, right?
It is.
Oh, it is?
I'm pretty sure this was before you guys the last meeting.
Unless we wanna
There's
make a
nothing that
change.
you need to do on
Okay.
this. This is on the agenda as
But for you guys, review comments, and if there were any changes you needed to do. But yeah, it's up for adoption at the November meeting.
Fair enough.
same for 9.
So we'll move on. Item number 9, discussion of possible action regarding proposed amendments and new rule relating to regarding inspector pre-licensing education requirements to ensure the content aligns with the inspector licensing exam subject matter in accordance with Sunset Commission Management Directive 2.6.
This is all the changes we do.
All the pre-licensure changes and everything else.
This is all the pre-licensure changes. We have received a couple of comments. I think they are all from Mr. Harbuck, and I believe he's on the phone wanting to talk.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention one thing that he requested, and that is that the comments that he made that were specific to 535.212 and 213, that they also apply to 214.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to clarify one thing. These have not, there have been no changes since last you've seen them. But there is, the way that we are moving forward with these is just a little bit confusing because they were proposed, most of these, not 214, were proposed in May. And then in August, they were withdrawn and reproposed. So just seeing them in the agendas is a bit confusing because they are both withdrawn and proposed. But they have been proposed in their current form in August to potentially be adopted in November.
So these are ones we've been through and we've looked at. They were proposed, withdrawn, now they go back, but final approval should, in theory, if we propose recommendation with no substantive changes, will be up for adoption in November at their commission. Right.
Absolutely.
And just be on the record, clarification, the reason they were withdrawn and reproposed is to provide a transition period for
Right.
people who are under the current system going into the new system.
We have a requirement that was established about a year ago, I believe, to submit all of our rules before proposals to the governor's office for their review. So before the commission meeting where they're proposed. So we've done that. We've received no comments from them. Mr. Harbuck's comments are primarily related to these rules being anti-competitive. And I know he will speak to that. I would tell you that I believe that these rules are making it much easier for individuals to become a licensed inspector by reducing the training requirements by about half in the most utilized track for inspectors. So this will allow for a broader door for individuals to join the inspection industry in a way that will put us in line with or come closer to the rest of the country. And it's also a directive from Sunset. That's all I have to say on that.
Mr. Harbuck?
Yes.
You wanted to speak on it?
Yes, I just had a few quick comments here. I won't belabor it. The documents that I've submitted, I think, pretty well cover almost all of this. But applications are, and by the way, thank you, Chelsea, for that introduction. Applications are down. The expense has gone up significantly when we went from a maximum of 10 down to 4 ride-alongs. We're going from 78 ride-along instructors down to 3 or 4 providers. We're going down from 48 cities that are covered through the open ride-along instructor system down to 8 cities based on the providers out there that are providing the training. We're also not providing some grandfathering provisions for those that have taken virtually the same courses under the current rules. I believe that's unfair to them. And I also, perhaps most importantly, feel that a comparable ride-along and practicum video program can be used, well, it can be, a comparable ride-along and practicum video program can be used by anyone in any city at any time. It doesn't have many of these restrictions that I just mentioned. But perhaps another more important thing to talk about here is the governor's review. In the last legislative session, SB 1995 was approved and signed by the governor. It's a bill that was sponsored by Chairman / Senator Birdwell of the Sunset Commission and the legislature. And it basically said that all rules that are made that affect market competition, have a market effect, need to be reviewed by the governor's office. It's a different office than the one that Chelsea referred to earlier. The effective date of that law was September 1. So we're covered by the statute now. The concern that I have is that we should have that governor's office review these rules and as the law requires prior to adoption or implementation. In this case, implementation won't occur until May. So one way or another, whether we have it reviewed before it's adopted or before it's implemented, it will have to go through this separate governor's office review. So if the rules are adopted and providers start working to create these courses, and at least part of the rules are disapproved of by this governor's office, the new office, that would make those providers undergo really, I use a phrase here, irreparable damage. I mean, no one's going to compensate them for the work that they put in to create these courses by having to rebuild or modify the courses they've already developed, should the governor's office, in their review before implementation at least, say that at least part of these rules are too anti-competitive or anti-competitive. So I just would encourage you to avoid the risk of this happening. This is irreparable harm. It's not something that is easily fixed, and there's nobody out there to compensate the trainers for having gone through that. And to avoid the risk of this by not adopting these rules until the governor's office has reviewed and approved them. So that's really all my comments. I did have a quick question though, a clarification on some of these rules, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm that TREC will accept ride-along instructors that are independent. We talked about this in an earlier meeting, I think, and Tony gave the answer, but I just wanted to confirm it here again. Just wanted to confirm that TREC will accept ride-along instructors that are independent of providers until the new rules take effect. Is that true?
Do you want me to answer that? Stan, this is Jennifer. Yeah, that's still true. And in fact, the list of previously approved ride-along instructors is still available on the TREC website as a resource.
Right, okay, good. So that'll go on until the new rules take effect. In this case, if these rules pass May 1st, correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no change to the current process for obtaining education and experience. These rules specifically go into effect on May 1st. Right, okay, good. And then the other thing I noticed is that even though we're no longer allowed to have rules that require TREC to approve instructors, Sunset Commission, I think, told us that we need to have the providers judge the instructors to decide whether they're qualified or not. But it sounds like we still have to show our instructors have the required qualifications when each provider is audited, even though it's not a formal process through application. Is that correct? That's correct. We have.
Ride-along instructors will still need to be approved, right? Those aren't CE. Are they?
No, they won't be.
They won't? Okay.
No, so all instructors are required to meet certain qualifications that are in our rules, but those qualifications will be confirmed by the providers rather than TREC. And then our jurisdiction will lie in an audit to ensure that providers are following those rule-based qualifications.
Very good. Thanks very much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. That's the only comments and questions I had. Appreciate your help.
Question, so those of us that were previously approved as instructors, I'm not attached to a provider and by any contract or anything. What would be my status after May as far as,
Being able to do a ride-along?
yeah, doing a ride-along for CE or providing continuing ed, you know, not attached to a provider per se?
Right, and from Truck's perspective, we've never affiliated a ride-along instructor specifically with a provider or a course.
Right.
But any
The original
any
intent.
instructor licenses that were still valid, that still had a future expiration date after August 31st of this year, anybody that obtained a new instructor license or renewed an instructor license received a 2-year approval. So we're not expiring out any licenses. Those that exist are still valid. They'll naturally expire out on their expiration date. Any new people that want to get on board with performing these ride-alongs would need to be vetted by an education provider or, again, substantiated by, I think anybody who's a sponsor qualifies to be a ride-along instructor because you have at least the 5 years of experience in the 200 and or 200 inspections and the teaching and training. So by default, you kind of have.
Well, as an example, I think I looked mine up, expires like next summer, June of 2020.
Okay.
I think it has ride-along, MCE and stuff like that.
Right.
So after that date, I'm also a sponsoring inspector. I think I found my letter from like 2001.
Right.
So
again, none of that will be taken away.
So I can still do ride-alongs
Right.
and submit that on behalf of an inspector for continuing ed?
I believe the certificate comes from the license holder, signed off on.
Well, here's
Signed off
kind of my question.
For CE.
Because the original intent of the ride-alongs was to get some of the inspectors out of the, you know, the classroom where they're maybe not, you know, get some actual out there and continuing ed.
Right.
Well, instructors that did CE before, you had to do your CE through a provider. It had to be a provider, because the course had to be approved through the provider. The CE instructor had to work through a provider in order to teach that
A
course.
general CE elective, we're not speaking to ride-along.
Ride-along.
Correct. That's my point. But the ride-alongs, you didn't have to be attached to a provider.
Right.
So now you're saying that ride-alongs, you don't have to have a specific certification or license to be ride-along instructor. So after May 1st.
But you still need to be qualified based on the language in the rule.
Absolutely.
That's what I was
I have no problem with that. But can the ride-along inspector now, does a ride-along inspector have to do that ride-along through a provider?
That's kind of wondering.
No,
Do I have to make
there's
an
a certification for that, right? They certify that they're qualified to do that.
That was my
The-
question, if you
the-
still have to recertify as a ride-along instructor, and she said
Well,
no.
It's not a
what Tony's
license.
saying,
Not a license.
it's not a license,
Sorry.
but you certify based on the form that you submit to
Right.
obtain the credit.
Right.
The
So-
instructor.
So on the list that you typically provide of how many ride-along instructors there are, you still
Mhm.
have to be registered as a ride-along instructor without a provider.
No.
No.
Anyone can do ride-along that meets the requirements. So you're not licensed as a ride-along instructor. I'll let you talk. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Anybody, you're right on track. Anybody who teaches a ride-along course instruction independent of a provider can do that if they satisfy the qualifications that are set forth in the rule, the new ones. And if you're asking how so that will be there will be new people who meet those qualifications that will want to do a ride-along for CE. And they can do that. But when Trek comes back, and not through an education provider, but we could audit the records and say, okay, well, we have record that this instructor taught this ride-along course session, and we haven't vetted them yet. He feels like, or she feels like they're qualified, then we can go to that person and what qualifies you.
So like if I did a ride-along with Lee 2 years from now, when he submits that for renewal, he'll have that form saying he did this. That'll have my name and stuff. And at that point, you would have to make a determination whether to accept it.
And no, right? We would accept
We
it.
would accept it.
And then and he would have to certify that he's qualified to provide that right along to you.
Okay.
And if we choose to audit that, then
Well-
he would circle back and say, how are you
What
qualified?
makes you
My
qualified?
short version of that question was, as a ride-along instructors, after the new rules are in place, what to do in the ride-along
Yeah.
instructors independent of providers?
Yes,
And that
for
is
CE.
That's what I wanted to
And that's
clarify.
the only,
Because if it was the other way around, that's gonna shorten
No,
that
no,
list
no, no.
dramatically.
It's
So I
not.
wanted to
Right.
make
It's
sure.
And I would assume that the credit is based on, isn't the credit based on whether they're qualified to be doing if they're not a qualified inspector, someone's taking the course for CE from an inspector who does not meet the qualifications. We still issue credit for that right along?
Well, what do you mean by it doesn't meet the qualifications?
Doesn't have the however many hours and what
In
whatever.
that submission,
Not a
there's a
sponsor, you know, the
spot where it
sponsor.
says, whoever is the instructor, I certify that I
Right,
am qualified.
right.
Yeah,
And so we would look at that person,
yeah.
but I
mean,
don't.
you'd probably
Audit,
search
though,
and
right?
like,
If you were
this
to
guy
audit
just got a
for
license
their-
last
for
month.
their
He can't be
qualifications.
doing this.
Right.
Say that
I
again?
think,
You would only
Right.
discover that in an audit for their qualifications. You would assume that it's being submitted properly, but could be discovered later that they were not qualified as a ride-along.
I think this is revealing that we have a little bit of work to do on the detail.
I think you could do it at the time of the submission for the credit.
Yeah, and the audit could be as simple as search that guy, does it?
Yeah, no,
does it-
I think all we need to do is
Yeah.
make an adjustment to the form.
Yeah.
It's easier just to
To
have a list
conform
of
with-
ride-along.
So I don't think it
instructors
would be,
as
I don't
opposed
think
to-
I don't think we'd wait for an audit, because how are you gonna audit individuals? I mean, you can't do that, but I think it would be when they submit that form, you know, they sign off, I meet these
Whether-
qualifications.
Yeah, whether it be an
At that
affidavit
point,
format or whatever it
you know,
may be.
And that's
We award
about the
credit.
only
Yeah.
area
Yeah.
that doesn't come under the auspices.
But if somebody's doing it multiple times, you're gonna have to check, to make sure they're qualified every time. Why not approve them once and then they're on record?
We're not going to approve them, and I think what Tony is saying, and this is how I see this, is that by use of the form, the promulgated form, and the instructor is certifying that they meet the minimum qualifications. Based on that submission of that document to us, our staff would award the CE credit.
To the student.
To the
taking
student.
ride-along.
The inspector.
On the back end, you know, through an audit program, we could go through these records and we can audit them from the back end. But I don't think it's reasonable for us every time that we get an application or a certification for CE credit to thoroughly vet.
Nothing
every
prohibits you
inspector.
from just kind of keeping a list of, these are all the guys I've already looked at.
I mean, absolutely, and I imagine that that's definitely what we would do from an, that's just, you know, good
I
practice.
think if you modify the form to show that they
But-
are attesting that
Yeah.
they are qualified to do that, I think that will, because that puts the liability.
We'd have an issue if they were
It
coming
does.
out there keep doing this and presenting themselves as not being qualified to do it,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
do it, you
We
know.
would
Right.
quickly find them.
There'd be an
That's a
issue,
big issue.
yeah.
I think this is a good opportunity, this is probably going to be a good, potential article, like for this
Mhm.
newsletter that just says, how will this change?
Yeah.
So that people understand how to do that. Maybe you take on the
Oh,
After it
website.
comes
Yeah, that's
into-
great.
Into effect.
Pull the curtain back, this is what's happening.
Yeah, because this is new territory.
I just had another question, if it's okay, that came to mind as we were discussing this. So the ride-along, approved ride-along instructors were required to do the ride-along, but, you know, I don't see any requirements for who does the practicum. Do those basically have to satisfy the same requirements as the ride-along instructors did before? I don't see the connection there, but if you could just clarify that for me, thank you.
So this is Jennifer, and Sam, the practicum and the ride-along is a little bit different. By definition, a practicum involves actually working in the area of study and using the knowledge and skills that have been learned in a school, or, you know, course of study designed especially for the preparation of clinicians. That involves supervised practical application of previously studied theory. So I just want to offer that as far as kind of helping to distinguish between what an instructor or an inspector ride-along is and what a practicum is.
Right, yeah, but my question is about the instructor qualifications. Are we sticking with this idea that anyone that teaches a practicum would be comparable to someone that used to teach a ride-along, and they have to have the same requirements that could come up in audit later?
I would suggest that this is a qualifying course. The practicum is a qualifying course, therefore the instructor needs to meet qualifications to teach pre-licensing and qualifying courses.
The equivalent of the ride-along, which is a little stricter standard. Am I correct, or maybe I'm wrong?
No, ride-along is addressed separately.
With him too.
Okay.
Is it 218?
No, it points back to 63. So in 535.63, the qualifications for instructors of qualifying courses, a provider must ensure that an instructor who teaches real estate or real estate inspection qualifying courses is competent in the subject matter to be taught and has the ability to teach effectively. Additionally, the provider must use an instructor who possesses the following qualifications: a college degree in the subject area to be taught and 3 years of teaching or training experience. To my knowledge, there's not a bachelor's degree in real estate inspection. I think that just speaks to real estate on the sales. Construction science. Okay, yeah, that could work. Or, this is an or, 5 years of active experience as a license holder, real estate for real estate, inspector for inspectors, and 3 years of experience in teaching or training, or the equivalent of subsection of either of the two mentioned above, as determined by the provider after consideration of the instructor's professional experience, research, authorship, or other significant endeavors in real estate or real estate inspection. Those are the qualifications for instructors of qualifying courses.
Right, and so we don't have the old requirement. I'm not sure it's old because we still use a ride-along for CEUs. So there's still a definition of what a ride-along instructor must have for qualifications. How does that differ from this? I apologize, I don't have the ride-along instructor requirements in front of me.
We don't either.
That's specific to inspectors, Stan, and this is more general to instructors. This is Tony, by the way. Instructors for qualifying education. So the ride-along is specific to, I believe it mirrors the sponsoring requirements, or is close to the sponsoring requirements. And so that's where those come from for a ride-along instructor, is that you have the same requirements you would otherwise need to sponsor an inspector.
Oh, right, I see what you're saying. In fact, I think we are looking at it, maybe not. This section C that you have on the screen here, for Texas Standards of Practice, the provider must use an instructor, 5 years active licensure, 200 real estate inspections, and 3 years experience. So the only difference between those two looks to me like there's a requirement that the instructor for those special classes and/or, which I think mirrors the ride-along instructor requirements, is only difference is that they require 200 real estate inspections for the ride-along. Is that correct? But that would not apply for those that are teaching the practicum. Is that correct?
So first of all, I believe the rule for ride-along instructors, I believe, is in 218.
But I
Chelsea,
believe
is that right?
it's the same requirements for the for those other CE courses as well.
The non-elective?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, sorry to distract with this. I just thought it might be good for everybody to know up front what these instructor requirements are. The practicums, I thought it was kind of mirroring the ride-along or trying to substitute for it. And so what we're saying is that we don't have a inspection requirement for the trainers in that case, unlike what we had for the ride-along.
Well, not a specific one, but if Jennifer, if you heard what she said about what's needed, they have to be, I forget what the terminology is for under 63, but they have to have some experience in what they're doing. It's just not a specific number of inspection hours like it was for ride-along, right?
Right, and the, let me pull that back up. You know, again, as an education provider, you're going to want to vet the instructors that you employ to teach your courses. You're going to want to ensure, you know, that they are effective at teaching, and that they are competent in the subject matter. But again, in 535-63, little b is what speaks specifically to minimum qualifications for instructors of qualifying courses.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that because some providers out there might say, hey, I can get this instructor to help me here. He's been licensed for 5 years, you know, he hasn't really done very many inspections, you know, but, you know, he satisfies all the other requirements, and they end up putting that person in as an instructor for the practicum. It seems like that would be not a good choice, you know, for a provider to do that. So just, you know, there's basically a provider could do that is what I'm concerned about, without making sure that they have enough experience under their belt with actually doing inspections and teach a practicum course. That's all.
So, Stan, I think what we've done in the rule is establish minimum qualifications. And then again, as I kind of indicated earlier, as an education provider, it's to your advantage to hire the most qualified and effective instructors that you can find. And you know, when you aren't employing an effective instructor, then it's likely that you're going to see some of the impact in the exam passage rates. And I know that's important to all of our education providers. So my hope would be, and I think it's reasonable to think, that our education providers will try to employ well-qualified instructors. And if they realize the instructor is not qualified or effective, I think it's fair to say that they would disengage with that instructor and move on.
Right. No, I agree completely with your concept there. I think it's very true. However, I'm not concerned about myself or some of the other, legitimate trainers. I'm worried about somebody thinking that they could save a few bucks by having somebody that's not quite as experienced. Usually the more experience an instructor has, usually the more expensive they are. So that's my only concern here. But, you know, I see what you're saying and I agree with it completely. I just wanted to bring out the fact that we're getting rid of one of these requirements, that the instructor for practicum has to have done at least 200 real estate inspections. That's all. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
Real quick, do we know the number of real estate agents in Texas?
Yeah, about 140,000.
Yeah.
142,000?
Count brokers, what do you count brokers?
Well, I'm sorry, I was looking at active,
Yeah.
I was looking at active brokers and salespersons.
Brokers, around one, I think, give or take.
Total, it's like 185 or 90, but that's including inactives and corporations.
3,400.
190. Who can see those numbers?
Yeah, total sales agents, 144,755.
Not me. From that?
Yeah, right there on the right hand column.
Wow.
150,000.
The number hasn't gone up in a decade, I don't think.
What, of inspectors?
Yeah, it's kind of hovered there for a long
I'm hard
time.
to expect to do a PSA.
It went down a little bit in 2008.
We went down substantially
Yeah,
after
It did, it's
2008.
gone up.
I think it's gone back to where it was
Yeah.
pre-2008,
Yeah.
right?
I think we're still a little below, but
Yeah.
we've increased, licensee inspector numbers have increased pretty consistently over the last.
And if I could just speak to this comment that someone made about the number of applications decreasing. If you guys remember, there was an anomaly last September. We had, I think, 72 or 75, a decrease in that. And ever since then, that's been carried over month to month. But if you take that month out of it, it's not a significant decrease. But that 1 month, for some reason, and I don't know why, we can't really figure out why there was a lack of applications that month. But it's just it skews the way the new applications look over the last fiscal year.
Well, the big fear was that when the ride-alongs went into place, that we'd have this huge drop in inspectors, and that just didn't happen.
No.
I mean, we actually kept going up, and, you know, at the market bears, you know, a lot of that, and supply and demand will take care of a lot of it. And I think we're seeing a little trend, kind of cresting trend, as the market is shifting a little bit anyway, and that's just going to be the kind of way it goes. Wow.
Well, the numbers will be very interesting just over the course of the next year, given that the pre-licensed education is changing substantially. You can get maybe a little bit erratic.
I think this actually makes it much more streamlined and much easier for someone to obtain their license, and it makes them a better inspector.
Well, the idea that you'd come from out of state, having already passed the national exam, and just focus on the Texas stuff, I think would be huge as well for people coming in.
And just to put your mind at ease, there's one thing that Mr. Harbuck mentioned, and it may turn out to be true, but it's not absolute, and that is that we received a letter from the governor's office at the end of August mentioning that they are establishing this office to review rules that make changes to market competition. But they have not yet established that office or that process. And so the letter we received was, keep doing what you're doing, and we will let you know if you are an agency. It is a limited number of agencies who will be captured in this House Bill or Senate Bill 1995. Now, I do expect, or I would not be at all surprised if our agency is among them as a licensing entity. But we don't even know that yet. And it's very common, if the governor's office has a position on something, for them to tell us. And they have not asked us to stop any rule review, any rule process while they establish this office. So they may look at this on the back end at the request of someone, but we are not obligated under this bill to change the way we do things at all right now. We're simply waiting for additional information.
Chairman Moore?
Yes.
I'd add to what Chelsea said too. I agree with everything she said. Also, this law doesn't really apply to inspectors because the governing board is controlled by brokers. So what the law is focused on, it would be a broker thing. So if the board was, you know, would probably like this, but if the real estate commission was controlled by inspectors, then that law would definitely apply.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, could I just make a quick comment?
It's the concept of regulating yourself, right? Well, you are an advisory body, and that is much more in play for broker and sales agent related rules because of the presence of some brokers on the commission.
Could I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, the law actually has one provision in it that says who the law applies to, and that says, you know, basically it says a regulatory body like TREC. And then further on down, when it describes what rules the regulatory bodies that are covered by the law must have the governor review, it doesn't say only rules by those that are represented by a majority on the board. That's already kicked in. So it is, I believe that the governor's office could say, no, you still need to have those reviewed by us. The other thing is that it certainly seems like we have our momentum going here. We want to go ahead and try to approve these rules. We want to get these changes going, you know, but the fact of the matter is, as I mentioned earlier, if they're adopted as final rules now, the governor's office interjects sometime after they are up and running. And it's before the implementation, the implementation is May 1. There's plenty of opportunity between now and then for the director of that division to be appointed and for the have staff coming up and running and taking the ball from there. And that's very likely to occur well before May 1, which means that TREC could get a letter that says, by the way, you know the law says that either before adoption or implementation, you must have your rules reviewed by us. Please send those rules over and give us all your documentation on the justification for it and so forth. And if they even partially reject parts of the rules, that means that some trainers, providers would have put, you know, the cogs and wheels in motion to try to develop these courses, and that would have been all for naught, at least partly. And so That's the irreparable harm that I was referring to earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, and that was certainly taken into consideration.
I just wanted to make one comment about the idea that of what's kind of governing things here. As Chelsea mentioned, we've gotten this letter from the governor's office. There's still some things we're waiting for information on, but what we do know for a fact is what 2.6 from our Sunset Report says. And I just want to read this. It says, direct the agency to review and streamline inspector pre-licensing education requirements by January 1st, 2020. As part of its review of the requirements, direct the agency to ensure the content aligns with the inspector licensing exam subject matter and evaluate the impact of any streamlining on exam by January 2021. So I think this is, we're doing what the legislature wants us to do.
Yep.
You guys are doing what the legislature.
I think we're right in line with what the intent was. I think the education subcommittee, where all this started, has put an exceptional amount of work into it and has come up with a really comprehensive and good process. I think we're good.
I just had a quick note about Tony's comment there, if I may.
Briefly, please.
Okay. Yes. The Sunset Commission, if you read the wording carefully in the Sunset Commission report and the requirements, what you'll see is that they want to ask the Inspector Committee and TREC to streamline it and reduce any inefficiencies, basically, as the Sunset standards say, reducing unnecessary restrictions on entry into the market. The examples that they give of how you might do that were things like reducing hours and so forth. That doesn't mean that the Sunset Commission didn't want you to address other issues. Simply by reducing the overall hours doesn't necessarily guarantee that you aren't making it as restrictive and potentially even more restrictive than having the numbers of hours than keeping the numbers of hours high like they were before. So just to mention that, thank you.
Any other discussion on agenda item number 9? I would entertain a motion. It's right, because it's already proposed, right? Okay. Is there any substantive changes that we want to consider as far as sending to the commissioners? No? Hearing none. Moving on, agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action regarding amendments to the TREC Consumer Protection Notice, CN1-2.
So at the last inspection committee meeting, staff was directed to bring forth some language to the consumer protection notice that address the insurance requirements, and that's what this is for your review.
The errors commission or error?
Probably.
If you see any other typos, please let us
Sorry,
know.
it's a little nitpicky.
No, please.
That's right.
So the blue is just,
Blue is
new.
The
new.
blue is the modification.
and it just says, so before it was
It's nothing.
giving
wasn't
them
there.
information about the recovery fund,
It was.
and now we've
Which is
added,
still there.
yeah, which is, like it
nothing's
says,
been
we have
taken
2
away.
funds that may be used.
Right.
Yeah.
And because this is a form that's used by multiple license holders, there's a lot of information on it.
Which they say, performance in a real estate expected in a negligent or incompetent manner, which basically that, if memory serves, that verb is just straight out of the, subchapter G, which is what the statute is there
So
for.
it's just a notice about the insurance requirement.
Does not throw the dollar amount out there, which is something we specifically asked for. But notifies consumer that is there. And it does not get rid of people trying to do frivolous stuff and whatnot, because that doesn't qualify as negligent or incompetent.
And the thought on this is simply that this allows the statutory requirement for all inspectors to maintain insurance. To, the world will now know that, but then it does not mess with any sort of agreement the inspector has with their client to limit liability, which may be which I assume would be handled in the court system if it ever were to become a.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of quiet on this one. I was expecting a little more on that. Everybody
Looks good, satisfied.
okay with that?
Just vague enough, but there,
Yeah.
I think that's what they were looking for.
Well, and so it doesn't apply to just one error.
Yeah, there can be multiple.
Yeah, you know. Sorry, little further thing. Anybody else? This item?
This will go before the commission, so we would need your recommendation.
Proposed for.
And it will still be a standalone document that we can link to on our website?
If nothing else changes, so I,
Yeah, all the requirements to how you display and what you're required to
I
do.
mean, the link we have now doesn't have this.
It'll be in the same place, it'll just be.
You'll just-
Just
I don't know.
stuck in the same
We
place.
don't have to change our link, our pointer.
that's a great question.
It is a great question, and no, it should be on the same place in the website, it'll just be updated.
Okay.
Good. Do we have to change the name of it?
Yeah, we changed the version number
Okay.
to one, yeah, so that might change.
But I think the language on the website just says consumer protection.
But what we did is we went to the website, we captured the link.
Yeah, it'll be fine, it'll be the same link, it'll just be a new document.
So when we, other than knowing that blue right there, will it have a different name, like version 2? Or
It'll be,
is it dated or?
what is it, C1-2
I'm
right
gonna
now?
go, yeah, it's 1-2.
So it'll be
CN1-2.
CN1-3 is what it'll be.
Okay.
But the link itself doesn't.
No, the link should be the same. I
I
hope.
don't
So
look
this
right
says,
now.
yeah, one,
It's CN-1-2.
Yeah, it's gonna change,
So it's gonna change the actual PDF link.
yeah.
So we do need to update our links.
Yes.
Wow.
so we can,
We'll look into
Not yet.
making
If we
that
can
easy.
find a way
We
to-
will make that easy for
Yeah.
everybody.
well, yeah,
You want
because
to name it
then we're gonna-
1-2?
thousands of, or
Change the
We're gonna
name
have to get rid of
already.
the,
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
We'll make it easy for everybody.
This is
'Cause
just for
This is just
proposal.
for-
Because
proposal for
this
the verb.
link, this document is linked by not just inspectors, but other people, so we need to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So we will do that.
Oh, that would.
I will ensure that.
that's already built into them.
All right, so
Heads on the block.
I would entertain a motion
On the block.
to approve or
Propose.
propose approval to the commissioners for the verbiage of the change in the consumer protection notice.
I recommend we submit to the commission the proposed change in the verbiage.
Okay, and a second by Doyle. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. And motion carries. Item number 11, discussion regarding the pending request for Attorney General opinion regarding the authority to perform sewer line inspection.
Was this included in the material?
Yep.
Okay. So this was a request submitted by a member of the legislature for the Office of the Attorney General to issue an opinion on whether a real estate inspector is authorized to perform inspections of sewer lines by camera. This was a surprise to us. In many regards, I mean, just kind of came out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so we will submit a brief that says what we've always said, really. This is in the jurisdiction of the plumbing board, and inspectors should not put a camera into a sewer line.
Unless the plumbing board says.
Who would want to?
I mean, so basically you just
Well, there's a ton of
defer to the
people-
plumbing board.
I don't want
There's a ton of people running around.
There's a lot to do that want to do it as an added, added value service to it.
Is that, I was going to just ask the question. I need to draft this brief, and I'm curious, I mean, do y'all want that authority? I mean, do the majority of inspectors want this? Is this kind of a subset?
There was a vendor that came through selling cameras and a bunch of guys bought them.
So
To look to increase their fees per job.
when I first started this endeavor, which I really enjoy, this business, I tried to do a lot of different things, lead risk assessments, pest control, all those things. And I found that the more I stretched myself, the less expert I was in what I really needed to do well, which is the home inspection.
Yeah.
So I exclusively do the home inspections now, and I have a niche where I don't do it for certain entities. I think it's dangerous to start being a one-stop shop when they're licensed to be real estate inspectors and they're doing plumbing issues. It becomes dangerous. It opens up a can of worms on, I don't know if we should prevent them from doing it if they want to have it as an value-added service, especially with the question of renewal on licensed plumbers at the moment, but, I wouldn't want to do it, speaking from my own experience.
Well, it would definitely be an value added, but it would need to be a value added as a licensed plumber.
Right.
At this point in the game. Now, there is room in a lot of industries for an overlap of jurisdiction for a particular thing. There are some court cases about that show how, certain kinds of mental health professionals can do a mental health assessment that a medical doctor can also do. There's some overlap. But in this case, there seems to be a challenge to find a bright line rule other than where we are today. And I did call the plumbing board just to say, what say you, what will y'all say in your brief? And, they've recently updated their definition of plumbing to make it clearer that they have jurisdiction over scoping.
Yeah, I got an email from their staff attorney last June, just specifically saying it does not allow professional real estate inspectors to perform sewer scope inspections. They quote the law. Yeah, okay.
I think go ahead, I think I might have it anyway. So my concern on that is not necessarily putting the camera down, it's the interpretation.
Right.
That's where I think you really get into the
Entering
gray
the
area.
Yeah.
Like getting into the structural
Well-
aspects, are we,
Can't be
what
licensed
are we
without.
overstepping our bounds?
Well, here's the question I don't get is if an inspector was allowed to do this and they scope the line and they find something, what's the next step?
They're gonna call a plumber.
You call a plumber, and is the plumber going to rely on the film from the scope inspector, or are they going to re-scope the line?
They'll do their own, they will
And what
scope
if
it.
it's not
Charge
during-
you scope it.
So the consumer then is on the hook for 2 scope sewer lines.
No. I agree.
Well, one is probably the client buyer who's on the hook for paying you to do it.
Right.
The other one, when you provide that to the seller,
Seller would do it.
that's on them to remedy the
I got you.
alleged
Yeah,
defects.
problem. I got you. That makes
So,
sense.
but it's, it goes down to the interpretation of entering the plumbing system. It's a visual inspection. Can you do damage? It's possible. Most of them probably don't. But from Trek's point of view, probably the best approach is, it's not within the scope of our license. If you think you're encroaching on the scope of another license, you need to deal with that entity separately. I mean, I do it with TCEQ and backflows. Things like that.
Randall?
Stand up, say your name. Randall Needham, Medium Property Inspection. It's really no different than adding WDI.
It's a different,
Different license.
But you're still working, termite inspections, I'm sorry.
We're just trying
But
to
it's still, when you put a scope down through there, you're looking for breaks in the pipe, which is going to be very obvious, and you're looking for settlement where that pipe sags, and you're going to see backup in there. That's really all you're looking. You can't damage it. It's a camera, so you can't damage the pipe. You can't do anything to it. I'm personally not going to do it. I don't want to have to go worry about getting a Hep C shot all the time, but some people do. And to me, it's, if they're willing to do that and that's what they want to do, it is an added benefit to the seller, because otherwise they've got to pay, they have to arrange to pay somebody else to come out during that time frame that it's got to be done. When the inspector's already there, they could provide that
If they
opportunity.
want to do it, then you get licensed, just like if you want to do a WDI, you'll get licensed through TDA.
Well, they're not, no, a lot of the guys aren't
If they're
licensed, they're working underneath.
If they're doing WDI, they're going to be licensed through TDA.
Somebody has to be like.
They're working underneath somebody else.
As a
Even
technician.
if, but
You're still
You
licensed.
could be
as
a technician underneath somebody. Still going to be licensed.
the concern I have with that, it's a good argument, but we're doing an invasive inspection at that point. And like the WDI, we're not doing an invasive inspection of probing, we're just doing this visual. So there's the visual aspect of it is correct. You're doing the termite inspection along with the structural mechanical, but both are visual. Once you unscrew that cap and you insert something into that hole to look for stuff, you're doing really something outside of what we've been designed to do, which is the visual.
well, I'd kick back when we take the cover off the panel.
Well, that's an inspection cover that
It's,
can't,
you're
well,
still taking the
got a
cover
good
off.
point, because you can't
Taking
cause
the
damage
cover
taking
off.
that cover off.
You're looking in.
But that's specifically in our SOP.
Right, right.
But I'm not sticking a probe inside that panel to look in. I'm visually just seeing.
Well, it's a different system too,
Yeah.
where it carries different materials, current versus sewage, so they're gonna behave differently.
I personally am not gonna do it, so.
I'm not either.
Bud Roselle, Good Home Inspection. When I do a WDI, I'm under a different license.
Right.
Okay? So if we're gonna do plumbing, then maybe they should have a plumbing license, because if they're able to circumvent a plumbing license and use their Trek license to do this, we need a SOP for that.
Right.
We might actually need an SOP for drones. You know, I don't know, but if we're gonna go, beyond,
Yeah.
there needs to be an SOP. Because the complaints are gonna come back to Trek, and they're
Right.
gonna sort them out, and we're gonna be reading those memos that they send out, or going, well, this isn't in our SOP, and
Yeah.
or a conversation we had earlier is gonna reoccur.
Well, access into sewage cleanout should be a departure provision for what we do. We don't need to open a sewer cleanout, because not only are we exposing ourselves to methane and other toxic fumes, but what if that doesn't go back on correctly? It's a little different from a dead front cover or an outlet cover. It's threaded by a harder material. A lot of that PVC or even cast iron.
Try to screw a cast iron cap back on?
They're not easy, yeah, and they can break easily. And then we're responsible for that. Who can ask questions?
Any other discussion on this item? This is not an actionable item. Or to bring it up for our attention?
Yeah, just wanted you to know about it.
I mean, so the status is you're right in a position of Trek
Yes, so
on
we
the
will just
relationship.
submit a brief to the Attorney General's Office Opinions Committee that they can consider as they draft their opinion in response to this legislator.
Anything else on that item? All right, we'll move on to number 12, request for a future meeting agenda item.
Meeting.
When's the next meeting scheduled?
In January, I
And bring
think.
The second Monday or third Monday?
Well, this is just items.
Oh, you're right.
Sorry,
I'll shut up.
sorry. Just the items. Anybody have any future meeting agenda items that they want? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to 13, discussion of future meeting dates. Yeah, I think we're looking at January. So the 20th is Martin Luther King Day,
No, I think it's, the 13th.
so I'm thinking the 13th.
I think we have a set schedule that we're the second Monday of the month, that middle month of the quarter. So it would be the 13th. That will be when we elect officers based on new rule.
Yep.
Well,
What are we looking at?
January 13th.
I don't know,
I
that's
think
what I
I'll
was
actually look at
thinking.
it. I'm like, oh, just this little week, and then I think.
All right.
All right, so.
Third Monday.
Is it third Monday?
Third
Morgan?
Monday.
So that would be what?
Inspector committee.
20th, and
That's Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Day.
Can't do that.
So we need to do the 13th then.
Well, then that's just, okay, yeah.
Is ESAC doing a meeting?
No, do second, okay, hold on. Monday.
Figure the
You
second,
said
third,
the
fourth, that
second.
gives,
Second Monday, yeah, ESAC the second.
So they're on
Monday.
the 13th.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that third Monday of January is always MLK Day. So we need to then have an
We don't have to
exception.
have Monday, do we?
Do it on
like Monday.
Mondays are the worst day to not be in the office.
We've done them Fridays before. We do Mondays or Fridays.
Easy for me, I don't work Fridays.
You don't want a Friday?
Friday?
You doesn't make you work on Friday?
All right, so what, we're looking at 17th maybe?
What is,
Friday the 17th?
No?
Broker lawyer meets second Friday.
Well, no, you can turn around.
Oh, not during the session, okay, no.
I'm
broker
going
lawyer.
to that. Well, I could just drive up there from here. In carpool.
We could do the 24th, which would technically be that same week that we were originally supposed to have it, just be a couple days later. I don't think that would put too much burden on the agenda for the commissioners.
so
So, so we work for, because it's
24th is asking.
Oh, okay. All right, 17.
Inspectors.
We good, Amber?
And I don't see anything in there.
Friday the 17th.
You want it on a Friday?
No, I'm just, it's my day off.
Are you good with that?
Otherwise, I don't.
Not travel friendly. I don't know, I would do that, but, Still at lunch, we'll be there. There you go.
All right,
Big bit of time out next.
that's it. And I entertain a motion to adjourn.
SOP meeting, I have a question on that real quick.
I'm sorry?
SOP?
Sure.
Next one. If I submit this document that I've been working on, we're gonna be discussing those changes, so shouldn't we open it up to a call?
You absolutely can. We don't have to schedule that here. You guys can schedule that on your own if you feel that's prudent to have.
I'd like to open it up for public comment, because if we can start getting some comment on that document, I think that would be helpful for feedback.
So the determination,
Like that.
I just want to get clarification from the staff standpoint. The clarification is you're going to send this out, determine whether or not that is the direction they want to go. And then if that is the case, then we can have a
Post the
meeting
meeting.
and post the material.
So just submitting the documentation to you guys, it doesn't require any kind of meeting.
Right, but can we submit that, that would give everybody time to do it, and then really look at this at the
Absolutely.
January meeting and kind of go forward from there?
Yeah, we can do that. Gives us plenty of time.
Okay.
I'll get that out this week.
All right. 12:02, motion adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone on the phone.
Oh, yeah. That's a comment.